Hey everyone, my name is Bjoern. I live in beautiful California, where I run a security startup called Templarbit. And I am pretty excited to be here. I tried to be here last year when it happened for the first time. I didn't make it. And this year I almost didn't make it either because Ryanair decided to cancel flights. And I was one of the flights, but luckily I, with great effort, am now in front of you. Obviously super honored to speak in front of you guys. I hope I can bring some value to everybody by talking about the hard road to initial traction. But before we jump in, I want to give you guys a little bit of background on who I am and why I might have some stuff to say on this. I was born in Germany, where I also studied computer science, and then right after college I decided it's probably a good idea to go to the Valley. And I spent about now almost a decade working in Silicon Valley and various startups and some big tech cos. Where I actually started my career was Match.com, the dating app giant that owns properties like Tinder and OkCupid. I actually had a very small hand in creating Tinder, and I was there when we bought OkCupid and opened up our San Francisco office. And that was a very interesting time, and after some years at Match, I decided I want to do early stage enterprise startups. I did a number of those. A lot of them didn't work out. Some of them were really successful, like Synack. Synack raised quite a bit of money and revolutionized sort of the pen testing model in security. So obviously now I'm a founder myself. Templarbit just graduated from Y Combinator. So I literally went off that stage pitching investors, and now I'm here in Dublin telling you guys how to find early traction. Doing a lot of early stage startups like I have, you sort of get forced, for better or worse, to figure out what you can do to get early traction. Something that comes for sure with a lot of learnings. And the very first thing that I can tell you guys is that initial traction is fucking hard. Like, it is really hard to find initial traction. And even if you are an early mover at a really, really promising market, you probably need to do almost the same amount of work than somebody with a less advantageous starting position. So traction is hard. I'm glad I reset that for you so we can work on finding a solution for it. Not only is traction hard to find, it's also what's going to most likely kill your startup. It isn't an engineering team, it isn't the design of your product, and it for sure is not the snacks or the lack thereof that you have in your fridge. It's poor distribution that will be the #1 cause for all the startups out there. So what you should be doing is you should be spending an equal amount of time building your product and finding a way to distribute it. Literally, from the moment on you build your product, the first code, the first pixel, you should also play around with finding a distribution channel that works for that product. Because your job is to find a traction channel that is lit. A channel that brings you users that move the needle. Like a channel that is so meaningful to your growth that that's actually what you need. You need nothing else. And to find traction like that, you need to go look for secrets. You can't be doing what everybody else is doing. I'm running a cybersecurity company, and a lot of the big players in cybersecurity, they are, they're really good at putting pretty billboards up in airports. I don't know if they do that around here, but in the US, if you travel from San Jose to Orange County, you're probably going to get introduced to about 5 different cybersecurity firms. So I know that that's not a traction channel for us, because clearly that isn't a secret anymore. Everybody's in that space. It's very crowded. That means the CAC is really high. That's not what you need. You need to find secrets. You need to find a channel that works for you that not a lot of people know about. Ideally, nobody else knows about it. You also need to overcome your channel bias. There's probably a lot of people sitting in front of me that think content marketing is pretty cool. I'll write a blog post, 10 best, blah, blah, blah. Coolest things I saw, 2017. And yeah, it's cool. I like doing it. It makes me feel good. But a lot of other people think the same way. So, I'm biased to that channel. Everybody is. Everybody has something that they like to do, that they think is cool, or that makes sense to them. But often that's a trap. Doing what you would like to do might not be the channel that will actually move the needle for your company. So don't try to go into something crowded just because you feel like that is where you want to, do marketing. The best thing you can do is to run traction experiments to test out channels. And you should do this at a very low cost and effort. Spend 1 month on it per channel, and don't spend anything more than $1,000 at trying to figure out what that channel might do for you at scale. You start by brainstorming a bunch of crazy ideas, and ideally you don't run too many of those experiments. Do maybe 3 or 4 at the same time, and try to have these experiments be really, truly outliers of what's out there. So don't have one of your experiments be a blog post every week. That's sort of figured out. Try to really get outside the box and run experiments that are maybe in traditional channels like blogging, but have a new angle to it. By the way, that's where you measure everything. At the very least, you should have a spreadsheet in place that tracks the entire conversion of all your experiments. Because what you need to do is you need to be able to look at all your experiments and you need to find channels that work. If none of your experiments work, you need to go back to the start and start rolling out new experiments until you have a couple of channels that you can look at that are adding to your growth. And then what you do is you focus on the winner. You really just zoom in on the channel that significantly works better than all the others. You literally spend all the efforts on that new core channel. This becomes your core driver for growth. Because uncovering strategies in your core channel will have a much greater impact over running 2 channels at the same time. The only time you should also consider doing a secondary channel on top of your core channel is to support that core channel. Great example, you have a YouTube show that does really well. Of course you should try and run Facebook ads to boost the view or do email marketing to tell people about that channel. So we just talked a little bit about the strategy of how to get traction, but I also want to get down to sort of the tactical level. It's always great if somebody's up here and theoretically talks about what you should be doing, but what should be helpful too is looking at concrete examples of stuff that has worked in the past. And we're going to start by looking at phase 1 example. What I mean by phase 1 is that the company is in its first phase. Usually this is in the first 12 to 18 months of a company's life. And actually growing in that phase isn't too tricky because you're trying to go from 0 to something. Even something as simple as guest blogging actually starts adding some first traction. Offline events is something that really worked well for us in that phase at some point. You would be surprised at how many people show up for a pizza. Always works, I don't know why. Now, I live in San Francisco, and meetups are not something that is uncommon. There's meetups every week. So we looked at that channel and we said, okay, meetups is a very crowded thing. So we need to do something different in that space. So the channel was cool, but the strategy was not. So our strategy was to host an offline event at a penthouse that we rented for $500, throw a pizza in there, and then do sort of an invite-only event to attract people that would become our first sort of evangelized fans. And that worked really well. I think we had about 50 to 100 people show up that evening. The reason why I can't remember the exact amount of people is because it was really a crazy thing where my phone just kept buzzing all night for people trying to get into this party. And it sort of also spread around San Francisco that there was something going on, so even if people weren't at the party, they were still talking about it on Twitter. Again, that was a pizza and a little bit of rental cost. This works well if you're in a city, or you can be in a city for maybe a conference, where you know that there's going to be a lot of your potential users. So doing pizza events is kind of cool, but it doesn't really scale well. And even in phase 1, you should experiment with something that does scale nicely. What I see working and still working today is micro apps. It's still not very crowded, and it is a great way to both funnel in your user base, but also do SEO. A great example here is Zillow. They've done a great job with their affordability calculator. People spend a lot of time on this, and when they do spend a lot of time on this, that means your SEO juice goes through the roof. So think about how you could turn a boring landing page into a micro app. It's not very crowded and it still works. Zillow shipped this many years ago. People are still using this a lot. All right, phase 2. Eventually you grow as a company and you need something that is a little bit more than just hosting pizza events and doing fancy landing pages. What worked well for us at Design Inc., which was a 99 Designs with high quality designers, was to launch a YouTube show. And hosting this weekly show was a lot of work, but eventually it drove a lot of brand recognition and also signups. We then started adding interviews in this weekly show and interviewed pretty famous designers. For instance, we had a show where we interviewed Hartmut Esslinger. He designed the first Macintosh. And when we closed him to be on the show, we decided to go back to our playing book around offline events, and we did a live show taping at a secret location in San Francisco, and did the same spiel as we did with the pizza event. We did an invite-only event. We live taped the show and then released it on YouTube, and it was a huge success. So we used a secondary channel to support our new core channel, which was our YouTube show. I want to talk about community building. It's very on trend right now to have a Slack group. Almost every product and almost every industry has a community like this. We had one too for Design Inc., and it was a great way to get the word out and stay connected to our users and evangelize with low effort towards a lot of people. The problem is right now this is very, very crowded. But you should still not give up on community building. You should just look for different tools. Something that we contemplate right now is looking into building a community around a Mastodon install. You probably never heard of this, but it is fairly popular in Japan and with certain individuals, mainly in the security industry. It is a Twitter-like open source app that lets people share what they're up to. So you can easily host an install on your server and have people sign up, similar to what Slack is doing around chat. So, oh my God, you're growing, what do you do now? Well, the first thing you should do is when you have a traction channel that works, is you should really zoom in and optimize. Because you want to drive that CAC down. The second thing you should do is you should talk to your users, especially in phase 1. Because those early adopters will tell you what you need to know about your product to make it work at scale. To get to a broader adoption and to appeal to more users, you need to talk to your fans in the early days and grow with them into a new user base. You should also set a new traction goal. If you've reached a certain traction point, it is really important to set a new goal right away and find a critical path to get there. And by critical path, I mean you need to just evaluate everything you do based on, is this going to get me to my traction goal? And if that's not the case, you don't do it. It sounds simple, but it can be actually really hard when it's a messy early stage startup. Eventually, I'm sorry to tell you, but eventually all of your traction channels that you worked hard on finding will run out. If you're lucky, you can use a traction channel for maybe 18 months, and then you need to go back to the drawing board and run new experiments to unlock your new traction channel. They usually run out because competitors start noticing what you do, and they're moving into the same space, driving up CAC. And when CAC gets so competitive and unattractive, that's when you know you need to stop that channel and find yourself a new one. Ideally, you see it coming and you start experimenting before the other one runs dry. So, finding traction is hard, but if you run experiments and you get rid of your channel bias, it actually makes things a lot easier. It gives you sort of a framework to work with, rather than just, throwing noodles at the wall, looking at what might stick. That's a really bad thing to do. Trust me, I've done that, it didn't work. One story I want to share with you before I leave, I got about 4 minutes left, is early days, San Francisco, 2013, we had a SaaS company called Userbase. We had some early traction in terms of making revenue because we sold to our peers at Y Combinator, and we thought, man, this is pretty cool, we're making money. And we've raised a little bit of money, nothing to write home about, and all we did is we focused on those early users and supporting them and building product. And that at the time seemed like something you should be doing because everybody told you to get close to your users, talk to them, iterate on the product. Well, actually that was a shit thing to do. We just got so busy dealing with those users and building product based on our gut that we forgot about exploring distribution. We wrote a blog post here and there. That was all what we did. We didn't do anything else. 18 months later, we ran out of capital, and we did a soft landing, and that was that. So please spend an equal amount of time while working on your product to figure out distribution. It will save your ass. Thank you.